In Ecuador, riots in Guayaquil and Latacunga prisons leave at least 18 dead. In China, at least 33 people were killed and 8 more are missing due to floods in the central province of Henan. Iran's government inaugurated an oil export terminal that avoids the Ormuz Strait. Hello, welcome to TeleSUR English. I am Denise Herrera and this is from the South. In Ecuador, riots in Guayaquil and Latacunga prisons left at least 18 dead and more than 35 wounded. Ecuadorian prison authorities reported riots at the penitentiary center in the city of Guayaquil. The incidents left 8 dead and 3 policemen injured. Meanwhile, in the social rehabilitation center of Cotopaxi in Latacunga, there was a riot in the medium and maximum security wards. So far, authorities report 10 inmates deaths and 35 wounded. 6 policemen were also injured during the riots in Cotopaxi. Operations are still ongoing to retake control of the penitentiary. Peru's National Jury of Elections said President-elect Pedro Castillo is to receive this Thursday the presidential credentials for the 2021 to 2026 period. The electoral authority will hand over the credentials to Pedro Castillo with 6 days to go before the presidential inauguration. In this context, Castillo met with outgoing President Francisco Sagasti in private for 2 hours to begin the transitions of the government. After the meeting, Castillo said that people need to know the situation of the state institutions. Castillo also takes over the presidency after defeating right-wing starting bearer Keiko Fujimori in the second round and dismantling together with the people and campaign promoted by Fujimori's supporters to hide the results of the June 6 election. In Haiti, proceedings for the funeral of President Jordan Moyes, assassinated in the early morning of July 7th, are underway. The First Lady, Martine Moyes, together with her children, received on Wednesday the condolences of several political personalities in the gardens of Haitian National Pantheon Museum. During the ceremony, the widow said that the family will pay for the funeral ceremony to be held this Thursday in the city of Cap Haitian in the country's north. The First Lady also said she will not benefit from the financial support of the public treasury. In the middle of the events, Haitian blocked Riots, Juvenal's hometown, to demand justice in the case of his assassination. The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro congratulated Vice President Delcy for her message of dialogue, understanding and work during the General Assembly of the Organization of Business Union of Venezuela. Fede Cámaras.
Yesterday, she was invited. The government was invited. The Bolivarian government was invited to the National Assembly of Fede Cámaras. Many years ago, we didn't see each other's faces with difference, and the Vice President asked me, we have an invitation to the Fede Cámaras General Assembly, a message of reconciliation, a message of productive work by Venezuela, and that was what the Vice President made yesterday. Tremendous speech was launched our executive Vice President before Fede Cámaras. I congratulate her and I ask for her a strong applause of recognition.
Likewise, President Nicolas Maduro denounced the kidnapping of more than $2 billion in gold held in the Bank of England.
The theft of assets abroad, the theft of our oil, the theft of gold there at the Bank of England in London. We are being robbed of the gold reserve of Venezuela, belonging to the Central Bank of Venezuela. They do not belong to the government, they belong to an autonomous constitutional institute, which is the Central Bank of Venezuela. More than $2 billion in gold. The gold bars deposited in the Bank of England then say that they belong to a government that does not exist in Venezuela. They invent a government of Narnia, of fantasy to steal our companies, the money, the accounts, and to steal from Venezuela the gold.
In addition, the President Maduro highlighted the report of the United States Agency for International Development, which pointed out that Washington does not know the use of almost $600 billion that were delivered to the Venezuelan extremist opposition led by Juan Guaidó.
These days, USAID, which is the organization of the United States government, one of the organizations that finance in the world what they call civil society, NGO that intervenes in countries, has an organization called USAID that handles billions of dollars pulled out an internal audit report saying that they had delivered to the extremist opposition in Venezuela $590 million in a year, and that they did the audit and only 2% had been invested in humanitarian affairs, and they didn't know what they had used and where the 98% money was.
In Uruguay, the union board that coordinates state entities began a strike this Thursday to defend employment, personnel and budget, with a central focus on the parliament. They denounced that many public services are at risk with empty offices, stopped machinery and without filling vacancies. They also denounced that there are agreements and concessions with private companies which they accuse of handing over the sovereignty. They pointed out that this is a crucial moment to show unity and solidarity. These actions take place in the context of the previous activities of the Union of Sea Workers, who set up a tent in front of the Legislative Palace due to repeated attempts to reduce salaries and to cut rights. The Union of Public Entities expect to mobilize thousands of workers outside the executive office, and one of its goals is to arrange a meeting with the President of the Republic. On Wednesday, Argentina became the first country in Latin America to enable a third option X in the gender section of national identity documents, with the first people receiving their need aids during the ceremony attended by President Alberto Fernández.
There are other identities besides the identity of a man or woman that must be respected and that have always existed, just that in other times they were hidden. And now there is this new possibility, which is that someone does not want to identify as a man or woman and identifies in another way. It is a step that we are taking. It is a step that I hope. It is a step that we are taking that I hope will end the day when nobody will be asked on the national identity card whether they are a man or a woman or whatever.
Chile's Senate approved on Wednesday a preliminary marriage equality bill, a historic step for the nation's LGBTQ community. With 22 votes in favor and 16 against, the Senate approved the idea to legislate a bill to legislate same-sex marriage, which will be now reviewed and further detailed in the upper chamber. After it passed, the legislation will have to be passed through the lower house chamber of deputies, where it is expected to face intense opposition from conservative lawmakers allied with President Sebastián Piñera. Well, take a short break now, don't go away. Welcome back. In Cuba, over 135,000 inhabitants of Pinar del Rio municipality began receiving the Abdala vaccine this week as part of the clinical intervention against COVID-19 that will cover the entire province. Public health authorities explained that the municipality of Pinar del Rio reports the highest number of cases and the highest rate of transmission of the disease. They also stated that the vaccination began in the health area of Hermanos Cruz, which has the highest infection rate within the municipality and a population of around 50,000 over 19 years old. Ecuadorian health authorities have confirmed 40 cases of the COVID-19 Delta strain in the country. Most of these cases are located in a province bordering Peru. Minister of Health Jimena Garzón confirmed the number of cases and stresses that the Delta strain not only multiplies the number of cases rapidly, but also increases medical complications, so the mortality risk is much higher. The minister also reiterated that the only way to avoid these complications are a worse outcome, it is to complete the vaccination schedule. Therefore, she urged citizens to participate in the vaccination campaigns as soon as possible. The government of Mexico sent pilot packaging tests of the Sputnik vaccine to the Gamaleya National Research Institute of Epidemiology and Microbiology located in Russia to be analyzed by qualified specialists. The shipment was authorized after unnecessary procedures for its transfer were completed, since the pilot tests of components 1 and 2 were kept at the National Institute of Virology. In a press release, the Pharmaceutical Institute highlighted that the successful ranking of the components, where 10 liters of the active substance were used. Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed his frustration with the West's hesitation in approving Russian coronavirus vaccine during a cabinet meeting on Wednesday.
Of course, it is hard to understand many of our colleagues who are continuing to differentiate between their own pandemic and someone else's, in particular, slowing down the registration of our vaccines, which are unquestionably safe and effective. I hope we can cooperate in this work after all.
Russia announced Wednesday a batch of its Sputnik coronavirus vaccine was produced for the first time in Vietnam, which is battling a new wave of COVID-19 infections. The Russian Direct Investment Fund said in a statement that the test batch was produced in partnership with Vietnam's state-owned pharmaceutical company Biotech. The RDAF added that the first samples from the batch will be shipped to the Gamaleya Center in Moscow. The vaccine's developer for quality control, the fund's CEO Kirill Dmitriev, said that the RDAF and BioNTech are actively cooperating in the technology transfer process to provide easier access to Sputnik for the population of Vietnam. Director General of the World Health Organization warned that 75% of the vaccines against COVID-19 have already been administered in only 10 countries and blamed the inequality on a lack of political commitment. Adhanom pointed out that the required resources to end the COVID-19 pandemic already exists. He denounced the lack of real commitment on the part of the world's governments to achieve it. Meanwhile, the Director General recalled that each government must pledge to protect its population and strive to vaccinate at least 10% of each country's population by September 2021, 40% by the end of this year, and 17% by mid-2022. Thousands of people demonstrated on Wednesday in Athens to other Greek cities against plans to make COVID-19 vaccination mandatory for all health workers, with police using tear gas and water cannot disperse on protesters. On the eve of a parliamentary vote on a government decree, protesters held up protests saying no to mandatory vaccination and freedom, along with Orthodox crosses and Greek flags. According to police authorities, over 3,000 people demonstrated in Athens and more than 2,000 people demonstrated in Thessaloniki, the country's second largest city. In India, a government study suggested that up to a third of the nation's population may have been infected with COVID-19.
Here we have this number, that is the overall seroprevalence is 67.6% in the entire population, which is from 6 years and adults included. In conclusion, 2/3 of the general population, that is above the age of 6 years, had SARS-CoV-2 infection. More importantly, a third of the population did not have any antibodies. That is still approximately 40 crore population of this country is still vulnerable.
More story coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In China, at least 33 people were killed and 8 more are missing due to floods in the central province of Henan. The natural disaster affected an area of more than 3 million inhabitants, 375,000 of whom were evacuated. The flood damaged 215,000 hectares of crops. The direct economic impact is more than 188 million US dollars. The Chinese government allocated a fund of 50 million US dollars to begin their rescue and recovery efforts. Part of the Jiangsu experienced record rainfall peaks, causing reservoirs to overflow. Despite the blockade imposed by the Western world, Iran inaugurated an oil export terminal that avoids the Ormuz Strait. President Hassan Rouhani announced that the new facility is located in the coast city of Yazd in the southern province of Hormuzgan. The project's first phase is expected to transfer 300,000 barrels of oil per day from Garin to Yazd. However, it is estimated that the terminal will have the capacity to load about 100,000 tons of crude oil when it is fully operational. The new crude oil export terminal is located in the Gulf of Oman and was built to avoid ships having to pass through the strategic strait of Ormuz.
Today is a great historic day for the Iranian nation. We started the operation of the 1,000-kilometer pipeline transferring crude oil from Gore to Yazd and the export operation in the Migrant terminal region.
Early Thursday morning in Syria, and defense systems expelled a new Israeli attack on the province of Homs. Al-Sartar airbase was targeted by airstrikes. Military authorities reported they shot down most of the missiles, which have only caused material damage. The Syrian government warned that with these attacks, the Israeli regime seeks to support terrorist groups such as Daesh and the al-Nusra Front in order to destabilize the West Asian region, among other objectives. Furthermore, the Syrian authorities pointed out that they will respond in due time to the Israeli military violations. In South Africa, the number of people killed in the recent riots rises to 276, some of them as a result of stampedes and others due to fallen fires and the methods of looting. A total of 234 deaths have been reported in KwaZulu-Natal and 442 deaths in Gauteng province to date. Police are investigating 168 of the deaths for murder. Some of the people died in stampedes or were crushed by falling objects, while others died in burning buildings. The riots broke out a day after former President Jacob Zuma began service a 15-month jail sentence for ignoring a corruption investigation. At least 17 migrants died in a shipwreck in the Mediterranean Sea between the coasts of Tunisia and Libya. According to local media, the Tunisian naval forces managed to rescue 380 migrants after the shipwreck of a boat that departed from Libya. The boat was found in Souara, one of the northwest coast of Libya. It was carrying migrants from Syria, Egypt, Sudan, and other African and West Asian countries. In early July, the bodies of 20 drowned migrants were reportedly found off the coast of the Tunisian city Fax. We have come to the end of this new brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media for TeleSUR English. I am Denise Herrera. Thank you for watching.